Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. And today I want to go over Donald Trump's best case scenario in the 2024 presidential election. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and make sure to follow the Twitter as well as join the Discord in the description down below. And so guys, looking at this aggregate, this is the official five-way race aggregate where Trump is up by 2.7%. He was kind of cratering in the aggregate for quite some time, dropping below a point lead, but has basically resurged back up to 2.7%. I mean, he's had a bigger lead before this, but he's definitely rebuilding the lead that he had from before, and this would still guarantee him an electoral college victory nonetheless. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to play around with a demographics map and look at my model and what would show for a best case scenario for Donald Trump. And what we're basically doing is we're getting the current aggregate and applying the 2020 polling error to the aggregate, which will result in a 5.4 plus national environment for the former president, which would basically shift the national electorate by almost 10 percentage points, which would give Donald Trump an extreme boost in the 2024 presidential election. And we could see that the model currently projects that Donald Trump would win an electoral college landslide. He is winning states like Maine, winning states like New Hampshire, New Mexico in this scenario, as well as Wisconsin. But what we're also going to incorporate is the demographic model and show what I think would be in the best case scenario for Donald Trump. And based out of the results from the model, as well as previous results and the current national environment, we are going to deduce what I think would be the best case scenario for Donald Trump. And so for the 18 to 29-year-old group, I expect Biden to still win this group in a best case scenario. I say he probably wins them by about maybe 13 points in Donald Trump's best case scenario. 30 to 44-year-olds, I expect this demographic to get a little bit more competitive. I'd say an 18-point victory for Biden would suffice. 45 to 64-year-olds, I think, would probably end up being a 10-point victory for Donald Trump. And for the 65-plus category, I'd expect this to be a plus 14 victory in a best-case scenario. As you could see, this demographic has not shifted as much as the other groups. The reason why is because this group is trending to the left nationally, and so it's not going to trend to the right as much as some of these other demographics would. I expect the turnout with young voters to be pretty down. I expect turnout with 30 to 44-year-olds to be down. I expect the turnout with 45 to 64-year-olds to be slightly down, and same goes with 65 plus voters, giving us a 323 electoral college result to Biden's 215, which is what my model actually currently has. When you have the regular RCP aggregate and the projected popular vote model from the previous video, we actually see Donald Trump is expected to get the same electoral college victory from that video. However, I have not even touched any of the other demographics yet. The college educated vote, I expect this to get closer by a couple of points. I'd say Biden probably still wins it by 14. In a best case scenario, this allows states like Virginia, New Hampshire to flip New Mexico. Non-college educated voters, I expect to be a pretty decent margin for Donald Trump. That allows him to win the state of Colorado. And we could see in the female vote, I expect this to get a little bit closer, but not as much as the male vote would shift to the right. That pushes the electorate far to the right. Even states like Illinois and New Jersey are on the table. Now, the income is going to be interesting because I actually expect the income factor to not drop as much there. 60 to 100K, I expect Donald Trump to gain a little bit in a best case scenario. Same with, 30 to 60K. I think he'd probably end up flipping a couple of states. That actually puts Washington and Oregon in his column. And if we look at under 30K, I expect this to flip as well. And you see even a state like Delaware ends up flipping in this electoral college scenario. And we haven't even touched any of these demographics. The white vote, I expect to get a couple more points. Republican, Hispanics, I expect to basically narrow up a significant amount. That even put a state like New York in play. I'd say Hispanics is probably only like a 10-point margin for Biden. Blacks would probably end up being around a 50-point-ish victory for Biden. I don't think Trump would win him, but I think he'd do pretty solid. This puts him even winning the state of California, which is really interesting. And this lines up with polling data that we have gotten now. Of course, if we were to actually line up with polling data, 65 plus would be significantly closer to the point where Biden actually recovers a little bit in the Electoral College. So I'd say if we were to kind of play around with these demographics a tiny bit, I'd end up probably saying that we will more than likely see, in a best case scenario, Donald Trump more than likely ends up, we'll kind of be playing around with these a tiny bit, but I'd say possibly in a best case scenario, Biden ends up getting, and we're going to be playing around with this here, but you'll see that, it's not going to be very, very pretty for him, but I do possibly think that more than likely in a best case scenario, Biden's probably losing, according to demographics, 371 to 167. You end up getting this map. Colorado flips, and if we look at the margins, they're going to be pretty interesting results. We'll see that, the state of New Hampshire is very competitive. New Jersey flips. Colorado ends up flipping by 1.4%. It actually votes to the right of New Jersey, which is really interesting. Maine at large is pretty competitive, but it does actually flip, and Illinois is on the verge of flipping in the scenario. Delaware's within a few points, same as Oregon, Connecticut. And so looking at this Electoral College scenario, Donald Trump is doing extremely well here. And according to the model, he's also performing extremely well, which incorporates demographic swings from this model. And so we're going to be filling out the electoral map now. I'd say that the safe Republican states include most of the Great Plains states like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, the Dakotas, Nebraska, including the 1st District and the at-large vote. I'd say Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, and Iowa would be included in these results. I'd expect Iowa and Ohio to be over 20-point victories for Donald Trump. Texas and Florida, I said them vice versa, but essentially those would be insta pickups for Donald Trump. Alaska, South Carolina, Maine second would basically be in the safe column, over 10-point victories for Donald Trump. California, I'd expect to be over the 10-point margin in a best case scenario for him. Same thing for DC, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Vermont. But that is actually about it. I even suspect Hawaii may even fall under 10 points in a best case scenario for Trump. Now we're going to be coming into some of the more quote unquote competitive states, which they're not going to really be close this time. If we look, we see that Wisconsin's a 10.2 percentage point win, Pennsylvania 9.4, Nevada 10.5, Michigan 7.9, Georgia 9.5, Arizona 9.1, Florida's a 16-point win. We look at Texas, a 16.7-point victory as of right now. And if we look at the results from here, Wisconsin is a 12-point win. Pennsylvania is a 12-point win. Nevada is a 15-point win for Donald Trump. Arizona being around a 16, 17-point victory for the former president, including North Carolina. Georgia's even an 18-point win in the scenario, which is very fascinating to look at. So I'd say in a best case scenario, the state of Georgia probably votes over 10 points for Donald Trump, same as North Carolina. I'd even say the state of Arizona and Nevada would even vote over 10 points for Donald Trump, giving you a massive victory in the Sun Belt in this Electoral College scenario. I'd say that for some of the, more closer Democratic states, I think Washington would be over 5 points for Biden. I think Biden would still hold on, but I think it would become sort of a competitive state. Polling suggests that Donald Trump's actually surging here, but I don't see any clear evidence that Washington's going to be voting to the right of the nation by that much. I would generally be very surprised if Washington votes even close to in line with the nation. I'd be very surprised if it did. If we look, Connecticut, Rhode Island are states that I believe would more than likely fall in the likely column. It would probably be a 7 or 8 point victory in both of these states. And you see that, Rhode Island was a 20-point win. Connecticut was a 20-point win for Biden. So those shifts would be pretty massive into the 2024 presidential cycle. I'd also suspect Hawaii to become more competitive, which I'm actually going to leave it up on the table because I think it'd actually be under 5 points for Biden. If we look at Maine's first, I'd expect this to fall under the likely category. I think it'd probably be a 7-point win for Biden, which would be a massive decrease from the 23-point win that he got in 2020. if we keep looking, we're going to see that there's not that many other states to fill out for Biden in the likely column. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are states that I think would flip into Donald Trump's column. I think he'd win both of these, all of these by around 8 or 9 points in a best case scenario, even though my model from the last video suggests that he is currently going to win them by 9, 7, 8 points as of right now. I don't think that those are really realistic results, and I think that in a best case scenario, he probably ends up winning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania by the high likely margins. You could even put Wisconsin in a plus 10 scenario, but as of right now, I don't think that Michigan or Pennsylvania would go over 10 points for Trump in a best case scenario. I believe that the states of New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, and New Hampshire, as well as Maine at large, would all be lean states for the former president, including a Nebraska second being a likely Republican state. And all of these victories would be pretty decent sized wins. He'd probably win New Mexico by 3, Minnesota by the same amount, Virginia by 2, New Hampshire by probably 1, Maine at large by 1.5. Like, he'd have pretty easy victories, and these would be massive shifts from 2020. You could see, plus 10.8% for Donald Trump in New Mexico, for Biden in New Mexico, plus 7.1 for Biden in Minnesota. Virginia was a 10-point victory for Biden in 2020. So those would be massive shifts to the right. I think the lean states for Biden would be the state of Oregon. He probably only wins it by 3 points. That'd be a massive decrease from his 2020 performance. However, it would be sort of in line with the model. The model currently has it as a 7.5 percentage point victory. However, if we look at the model, we're actually going to see Oregon falls in the lean category based out of demographics. And I think in this scenario, demographics really outweigh, the model in this scenario. So I do think that it ended up falling in that category. Hawaii is listed as a 14-point victory, but I do think in this scenario, it would be an anomaly, and I would expect it to fall below 5 points. I probably think it'd be like a 3 or 4 point win for Biden. I think he still wins it this cycle, but I think if Donald Trump has a really good night, I'd actually expect Biden to probably only barely win the state. Same thing goes for Illinois. I think Illinois could fall under 5 in a best case scenario for Donald Trump. I think that more than likely the state does end up voting for Biden, just because the white suburban vote will probably end up keeping it down. But I think, Trump would probably get 30% of the African American vote here, and that would definitely, tighten up the state quite a bit. For Colorado, I think it's really interesting because I do actually think Donald Trump could pick it up in like an ultimate best case scenario. I think Donald Trump can win it. I think it'd be really close. Donald Trump wins it by 1.4% according to the model. The model over here has it as exactly a 5-point win. But I think in an ultimate best case scenario, I think Donald Trump could pick up the state of Colorado. I think a tilt state for Biden would possibly be his home state of Delaware, where he basically was born and was senator. Well, I think he was born in Pennsylvania, but I think he was senator in Delaware for a long time. The state is within 10 points according to the model, but if we look at the demographic model, we could see it's within 4 points. So I think that this could be a state that actually ends up voting for Biden by a tilt margin in this electoral college scenario. I think another sleeper flip for Donald Trump in this scenario would actually be the state of New Jersey. Now, I think it would be really close. I think it'd be, basically within the wire. I think it'd be extremely competitive. But I think Donald Trump could actually pick it up in an ultimate best case scenario. The polling has it within 5 points. If you apply the 2020 polling error in the state, it's actually a tilt margin for Biden. And we're not even close to the national environment for this to happen yet. And so if we do end up there, I'd suspect that this would end up being an extremely, big sleeper flip for the former president, and he would end up winning it in 2024. Now, for the state of New York, this is really interesting because the polling here suggests it's close, but I don't think it's close enough for Biden to end up losing it. I'd say Biden wins it literally by over a point in a best case scenario. I think it votes to the right of Illinois, so I think Illinois would be more Democrat than New York. You'd see New York shift to the right very, very much. I think this scenario would probably warrant for like a +8 national environment scenario for Donald Trump. He'd probably win the popular vote by 8 in this electoral college scenario. I think, Trump would win a decent amount of voters, in the New York boroughs. I think he'd do really good there. I think he'd do better in upstate New York, but I still don't think it'd be enough for him to flip it. But we do have the final electoral college map from the scenario, which suggests that Donald Trump would win with 371 electoral votes to Biden's 167 in an ultimate best case scenario for the former president. If you guys did enjoy this analysis, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, make sure to go ahead and follow the Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below, and I will see you guys very, very soon.